Thank you all for attending this AAA online briefing series on the business case for neurodiversity, which is not only important to understand for your existing workforce, but also as an important source for tech talent. My name is Simon Bush and I'm the CEO of the AAA. It's an absolute pleasure to host these informative webinars with our valued partner, auticon. Please note this event is being recorded and there will be opportunities for questions, so please use the Q&A function. Let us begin today by recognising the tens of thousands of years of innovation that have been handed down through the generations from the original custodians of the lands upon which we meet today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging traditional owners and custodians of the lands and also to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's now my absolute pleasure to hand over to Yvonne at auticon, who will be hosting the webinar today. Yvonne.
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar in our Lunch and Learn series called The Advantage of Building a Neurodiverse Organization. Now, we've got some great speakers for you today, and I'm really looking forward to this first session and the next upcoming sessions. We've got 3 all up in the next 3 months. So in this session, we're going to look at the business case for neurodiversity from a CIO and a leadership perspective. In webinar 2, we will explore workplace design and how to build a thriving culture of neuroacceptance. And then in our final session, which will be running later in the year, we look at how to empower neurodivergent talent to enrich your innovation strategy. So stay tuned and make sure you get your tickets so you won't miss out. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, I just want to give you a quick overview of auticon. So first opening our doors in Germany in 2011, auticon is an award-winning social innovation company. We are an autistic majority business with 465 autistic employees located in 15 countries around the world. Our autistic technologists work with clients performing as software developers, data analysts, quality assurance engineers, and much more. Our clients experience our outstanding autistic professionals firsthand, opening minds and achieving their diversity goals. So our model improves the economic and social conditions of the autistic community with quality careers, unlocking opportunity, and empowering client organizations through actionable neurodiversity training and also our advisory services. Now at auticon, our employees build lifelong careers in technology, discovering personal autonomy and also improving their self-esteem. It's really exciting times for auticon. Now, let me introduce our host for today's webinar. We've got Bodo Mann, audicon's Australia and New Zealand CEO and Managing Director. Over the last 20 years, Bodo has worked extensively with boards, CEOs, and senior executives from ASX 100 and global blue chip organizations across Australasia and Europe on a variety of engagements, including strategy development, technology, digital transformation, board advisory, leadership consulting, and executive search. Bodo is passionate about building innovative social impact businesses, which are purpose-driven and shine through neurodiversity. Now, Bodo, I'm going to hand over to you because I believe we have some amazing guests for today's webinar.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. Yes, and I couldn't agree more with you. We have some amazing guests and a fascinating topic. So thank you all out there who felt compelled and are interested and share the passion like we do as well. So let me start with Josanne. So our first guest, Josanne, Director of Product and Customer Experience at the University of Melbourne. Josanne is an accomplished marketing professional with a unique drive for diversity and inclusion. Growing up in a previously disadvantaged community, she deeply understands the importance of inclusivity, which was reflected in her leadership at Massey University to increase the representation of Maori and Pacifica students. At Melbourne University, she leverages her rich cultural background and 15+ years of experience in education, coupled with her academic qualifications, a Bachelor of Communication and Master of Management, to create innovative products and services for diverse post-experience community. Josanne's commitment to diversity stems from her personal journey and informs her professional ethos, fueling her drive to foster a more diverse and inclusive workforce. Welcome to the panel, Josanne. Thank you. Then we will be chatting to Olympian and software engineer Chris Morgan. Chris is a bronze medalist and 3 times Olympian. in the sport of rowing. Therefore, lots of early mornings on the water, I guess, Chris. And over the last 20 years, he has led software engineering teams in some of the world's largest tech companies. Chris is also autistic and believes that autism has been one of the fundamental elements of making him successful. Through his experience in elite sport and business leadership in companies like Atlassian, ResMed, BAE Systems, Chris understands the challenges that many autistic people face in large organizations. He also understands the unique and valuable opportunities open to Australian businesses, provided they embrace neurodiversity, particularly in their quest to create more innovative software solutions. Welcome to the panel, Chris. Karen Hansen, welcome to the panel. Karen's career journey began in academia, where she spent 5 years as a postdoctoral research fellow at the Brain Science Institute, Swinburne University, specializing in emotion research. In 2011, she joined Forethought, a marketing advisory, strategy, and analytics consulting company, as a marketing science analyst, and her dedication and experience propelled her through the ranks to senior analyst, principal analyst, head of marketing science, and ultimately the general manager of analytics research solution at Forethought Outcomes. With a PhD in psychology and an executive education certificate in leadership decision-making from Harvard University, Karen combines her expertise in psychology and leadership to foster a culture of innovation, to inspire effective leadership, and to build high-performing teams within her organization. She's particularly passionate about the importance of diversity in the workplace and the positive outcomes that diversity has on creativity, problem solving, and workplace culture. Again, welcome Joseanne, Karen, and Chris. Thanks for taking part in today's webinar. Simon already mentioned that we have this Q&A function, so please feel free to post your questions and we will come back to them as part of the webinar. So allow me maybe to commence the next 10 minutes to talk about your background and some basic get-to-know questions. So let me start with Joseanne. Tell me about your background and what drives your passion for enhancing diversity and inclusion in organizations like the University of Melbourne.
I've been thinking a lot about that question in the lead up to this event because it did really make me reflect on where that passion comes from, because I never really reflected on it before. And I think for me, it's kind of deeply personal, but I've always had a passion for diversity and inclusion. I think even when it was really topical in business, and when I did my master's degree quite a few years ago now, the topic actually was the benefits of diversity in business. And unfortunately, I couldn't find my thesis, so I couldn't refer to it for any tips or information for today's event. But it's just always been something that has been really near and dear to my heart. And I think in reflecting on where this passion comes from, I think for me, it's really fueled by my background. I'm from South Africa. My parents were quite impacted, as many families, by the apartheid system at the time. And I think I saw, firsthand how somebody's, potential can be impacted by their circumstances, background, environment, all those sorts of things. And I think that just really instilled in me this really deep belief in equality and inclusion. And I think, so thank you for that question, because it really did make me reflect quite deeply about where this passion actually really comes from.
Thanks very much. Chris, maybe a question for you, building on your background in elite sport as well as in business, what drives your passion for D&I?
It's actually remarkably similar to what Joseanne was just saying I sum it up in one word of acceptance. So for me, it really was my own life story informed what I really wanted for other people. So growing up, I had no clue about my potential, my intake sport, my awards were participation ribbons. I was never the kid that was chosen in the team sports. There was always that feeling of being misunderstood. And a lot of that insecurity led to my drive to prove my own self-worth and, develop the sense of pride I I have in showing that I can overcome barriers and I can be more than people are categorizing me as being. And, my life has taken a lot of twists and turns. I was headed for academia and had no idea about my sporting potential, and didn't start rowing until third year university. And from there on, unfortunately, contrary to most belief, Olympians aren't paid massive dollars. Maybe in Australia, if you're a swimmer, you can make a living out of it. But no, for most of my career, there was two parallel streams of, training 40 hours a week and working 40 hours a week and, somewhere sleeping in between and not much else. So I know how hard it is firsthand when people can't see you, when you feel you can't thrive and show all that you can be. And I really don't want that for anyone. So, that's at the core of what DEI is. That's at the core, how can we help everyone be all that they can be? And I want to use my story of, all the twists and turns of my life to help change people's ideas about what's possible for everyone so that we can all achieve more.
It's fascinating. And I read an interesting article just recently where you were quoted, "My way of thinking and my approach to things is fundamentally different. And one of my success factors," you said, "autism made me successful." And I think you started alluding on that, but feel free to unpack this particular statement a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd love to. So rowing is a really highly technical sport. When we look at video footage in review, we literally will go through it frame by frame and say, look, there was one frame of timing difference here. That's a massive difference. How do we close that? So we're really diving into the minutiae at the high end of rowing performance. And my ability to see the details and to really hone in on those small things that we need to get right. My ability to have that enduring focus where essentially you go out and you do the same thing for not just minutes, but hours on end. That's rowing. And the goal is to do it robotically the same from the first stroke to the last, whether you're feeling fresh or, your body is screaming with lactate and you could barely say your own name. You have to be able to do the same thing over and over and over again. So that ability to endure and really stay focused on the small things, the ability to see the underlying patterns and connect things that others might not be from, both a technical viewpoint in the boat and from what others are saying in crew debriefs, and the desire to know why, the desire to be all in on a topic and really understand, well, how does that work? What's sitting under that? Really, really dive in and make sure that I can see the full picture and I understand the full picture, that compulsion that a lot of us have to really get into that. And as I alluded to before, above all, that ability to endure hardship, growing up without support, growing up without that feeling of inclusion, there's a lot of hardship in everyday life. And okay, physical pain is different to that sort of thing, but when you're tired as you really don't want to get up for the morning and you're wondering, well, how am I going to get through today's training? Like that ability to back yourself and say, no, I've got this, like I can do this. That was something that was just imbued in me by the life I had growing up. So yeah, a lot of that informed where I went with my sport.
Thanks for sharing. Amazing story and insights. Karen, you live and breathe basically data analytics. I mean, it's fair to say you're heavily involved in this day to day. Can you tell me a little bit more about the background and the work with neurodiverse teams?
Yeah, certainly. So as you sort of mentioned in my bio, a fair amount of my early career I spent in academia. And there were elements of that I really enjoyed, but the thing that was really missing for me was feeling part of a team and working with a team on a daily basis. And so I went looking for another opportunity and was very fortunate to find this role at Forethought that basically ticked all my boxes. So, how often does that happen? So it was a research role, which is my passion. I'm a research practitioner, I have a PhD, I love research, but it was also a very specific part of the research process, which is the analytics component. So get the data, interrogate the data, find the patterns in the data, and then interpret what those patterns mean. And that's the part of research that I love the most. And it's very hard to find research roles where you get to do just that and you don't have to do the other elements of the research. And then finally, it was part of a team, the marketing science team. So I was very fortunate to find this role. It was the perfect role for me. And I've been very fortunate that I've worked with a lot of really amazing people in that team as my teammates, as well as having the privilege of leading that team. So I took over as the director of marketing science about 6 years ago, I think. And I think that taking over that team and managing that team and really, I think looking at how that team operated, particularly the diversity of that team in terms of their cognitive kind of style, I think has really informed my leadership philosophy and my leadership style, because what was really interesting working in that team and then leading that team was that we basically put our analysts in an environment that isn't always conducive to bringing out their best. So we put them in an open plan workplace. We have brainstorming sessions where you've basically got an hour to come up with a solution. And if you don't, talk a lot, you're considered to not be contributing. And I was just sort of like reflecting once I got the opportunity to take over the leadership of the team about, are we really setting this team up for success? What can we actually change about the structures and the systems and the processes that we have in place that will actually allow us to get the best out of this team and set them up for success. So I'm really fortunate that I've had that opportunity to work with that team, but also to lead them. They've taught me a lot and really informed, what my leadership philosophy and style is all about. So, and like Josanne, I hadn't actually reflected until I saw the questions for today about why, diversity and inclusion is so important. But the other thing I think that drives me is I'm from the generation of women and girls who had to stop playing certain sports because that they didn't have leagues for women back in the day. So from a very young age, I was very militant about equality and inclusion because I couldn't play cricket and I couldn't play baseball and I couldn't play football. And I refused to play netball, no offense to netballers, but it just wasn't my thing. I think we can trace my passion a long way back to my early days trying to find a sport that I was allowed to play as a young woman. So
that begs the question, why do you want to play cricket overall? Anyone, right? But anyway, let's not go there, right?
Yeah, okay. Look, it's all personal taste, Bodo.
I know. I'm just stirring the pot, but thank you very much for sharing it. Very, very kind. So maybe let's dive into the actual topic. And this is a question addressed to the entire panel, but maybe we start with Josanne. So why would CIOs be well advised to consider neurodiversity as part of executing the business strategy? Josanne, what do you think?
My response is going to be quite broad, sort of thinking about diversity in all its forms. And I think I'm going to have maybe a different take than what's expected. I think there's a lot of documented research out there around, the benefits of diversity in all its forms, whether it's neurodiversity or cultural diversity or gender diversity. We know that diversity brings unique perspectives into an organization, which can help with, more effective problem solving, creativity, innovation, all those sorts of things. A lot of information out there around the benefits for businesses. But I personally feel that there's this element around personal responsibility, and sometimes it's actually our role to prioritize action over strategy and sometimes to lead our organizations forward. And I'll just, I'll give you an example. So when I started at the University of Melbourne, one of the requirements at interviews is that you have to have gender diversity on your panel. And it's just a small thing. I never felt that was sufficient. So every interview that I conducted, I made sure that I had greater diversity beyond just gender diversity. So that's an action that I'm taking as an individual in the absence of a kind of like bigger strategy. We have a diversity and inclusion team, and the department that I'm in, really proactive, very focused in that space. But for me, I haven't seen a documented strategy that's really driven my behavior as an individual. And just another example is that we've recently engaged with auticon. We have a consultant working in our team. It's been a really amazing experience, but there was no strategy that facilitated that action on my part. That was me having an understanding of the benefits of diversity, an appreciation of the benefits of diversity in all its forms. Our relationship with auticon, it's obviously focused around neurodiversity, but I think it's up to us to take that personal responsibility to get ourselves educated around how we can cultivate better diversity, how we can promote inclusivity. And sometimes I think organizations can lag behind, or they have big strategies that sits in someone's desk and things don't really get mobilized, for whatever reason. And so I think, yes, it is important to have a strategy around diversity, whether it's neurodiversity or cultural diversity. But my personal view is that, as individuals, I think we have a personal responsibility to play a real critical role in actually making the change and taking action and leading our organizations.
I like that. Thank you very much. Chris, what would be your take on that question?
There is so much to unpack in that question. So initially, I thought about responding with, what are some of the typical attributes you may see more in neurodiverse people? I hinted to some of the things that I think I've brought to sport and business and whatever else I apply myself to, but I don't think that's beneficial in some ways. I note in one of the questions, I see the words, what kind of neurodiverse people should I look for? Like, they're in a lot of DEI, not just neurodiversity. There's this bucketing element that happens that, if I hire this category of people, I will get this benefit. But, there's a saying that if you know someone who's neurodiverse, one neurodiverse person, you don't know neurodiversity. There's a reason why, especially in neurodiversity, in autism, there's a spectrum. It indicates that there is diversity within every bucket within a category, and then down and down and down, and there's turtles all the way down, so to speak, of every person on this planet is different and brings a different set of strengths. Now, yes, they can be common amongst a group, but I think what we need to ask ourselves is, why do I want to bring any diversity? And the answer is friction. It's going to slow things down. Now, that may sound counterintuitive, but the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, if you have this friction, it is going to slow you down, and it's going to force you to debate ideas. It's going to force you to say, is there another way of doing things? Because clearly, two people are approaching things from a different angle. We need to harmonize this. How do we harmonize this? Well, we need to look at how we take best of breeds from all these different approaches. That's the benefit of diversity. And it can be harnessed really positively if we know that that's what we're after, and that's what we're trying to imbue, is taking all these different approaches and taking the best of it. So I wouldn't say there is one benefit you're going to get. I would say that the more diverse your workforce, the more friction there's going to be, the more responsibility there's going to be on leaders, but the more approaches are going to come to things, and the more unique solutions are going to come out the other end. But we need to be looking at that as the reason for diversity, rather than it's going to give me X, Y, or Z.
I like the notion of friction or creative conflict, which is an interesting idea. I would agree with you, absolutely. Karen, what would you say?
Yes, I guess similar to what Josanne was saying about the responsibility of the individual. So I've been very fortunate. Forethought is small enough that you don't feel like you're part of a cog in a really big machine, and you do have influence. So I always found that once I got to a sort of leadership position, I had a voice, and I could sort of share my philosophies, particularly around the importance of diversity. It's always been a passion of mine. Once I got to that leadership position, about building diverse teams, because, as Joseanne said, there's a plethora of literature and evidence about the benefits of diversity. And I wanted to build a diverse team because, I want different ideas in the room. I know that people have different strengths and, different areas of focus. And so if you're trying to solve a problem, you want as many different perspectives and approaches, and you want people to think outside the square. You want people to get stuck in the detail. You want people to think big picture. You want that full, kind of 360 a view of the problem or the decision or whatever it is that you're trying to solve for. So yeah, I really think that idea of like individuals leaning in and setting an example, and not just relying on a document or a strategy or a policy, I think is really important. And yes, and it is broad. And I think, for me, obviously, we think about diversity in terms of gender diversity and cultural background. But I think my experience working with and leading a team of analysts was that there's so much more to diversity, and cognitive style certainly is a big one. And working in an organisation like mine, where we rely on specialised teams to cross-collaborate, I thought, that those different types of styles are just bringing so much value to the conversation. Why wouldn't you want that in your organisation? So the more diverse, and it would be perfect. A perfect world is in a business of 80 people that they are all completely different with completely different strengths, and collectively that's where your power comes from. So it's a no-brainer for me.
Maybe Karen, I might just stay with you. Like, if we adopt a leadership perspective, right, and maybe you have some practical advice for managers or leaders, actually how to manage that constructive conflict. While we talk about it, but actually in real life and practical terms, it might not be as straightforward, right? Because it takes some conflict, handling skills. But maybe you have some advice how best to harness and unleash that power as part of a constructive conflict with different, with people who think differently.
Yeah. So I think starting with my actual team, the team that I lead and the team that I manage, I think the number one thing for me in terms of getting really good outcomes from my team and setting my guys up for success is just creating an environment where people are comfortable sharing what works for them, how they get the best out of themselves, instead of making assumptions about what you think they need. Actually, having that conversation about, what kind of environment do you need in order to be your best? How do we set you up for success? How do you, what is your approach to solving problems? How does your brain work? Like, how can we help you be as successful as you can possibly be? And obviously, to do that, you need to build good relationships. You need to build trust, and you need to create a space where people are comfortable having that conversation, because you can't address an issue if you actually don't know what that issue is. So I think creating a trusting, psychologically safe environment is the first step, so that people will open, have those conversations about how they work best and what they need. And then for me, it's always about me then being the advocate for my team and educating other people in the business about, this is how my team works best. This is how they get the best out of themselves. This is what they need. This is how they like to communicate. This is how they process information, but also empowering my team to have those conversations. But knowing that I've always got their back. If you need me to be there or support you or back you up, I'm there. But, be comfortable having these conversations with people, regardless of whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse. We all have our own styles of working, and we should all be very open about it. Because the more we share and understand each other, probably the the easier it's going to be for us to work together and, achieve an outcome together rather than doing it in our own little silos or, just crossing your fingers that people will get where I'm coming from. So, but yeah, I think the friction, I think Chris talked about friction. Friction's good as well, as long as it's sort of collaborative and collegiate friction. And so, yeah, I think the role I try to play is just, an advocate and a support. And just letting my team know that I've got your back and whatever you need from me, you'll get. But yeah, encouraging them to get to know their colleagues and, have that sort of empathy and mutual understanding of each other.
And I like the advice of don't assume, but communicate, right? And I think that applies to also like any interpersonal, connection. So it's a good suggestion. I agree. Joseanne, any suggestions for leaders or practical advice which work for you to harness?
Yeah, I loved what Chris said about friction, because when you have different perspectives, you're going to have, different ideas and opinions about things, which could lead to disagreements. I think a leader truly has to understand or have an appreciation for the diversity within their team to kind of ride that out, to go, this is going to be tough. We're going to have some different perspectives, which might lead to disagreements, but that's going to challenge the team and it's going to offer people a different perspective and it's going to open people's minds and it's worth it at the end of the day. But also to what Karen was saying, the piece around psychological safety, I think it becomes a cultural piece where people actually feel that the environment that has been cultivated is safe to offer an alternative perspective, is safe to speak up, and there is that psychological safety. So I think, it's really about creating that environment that's safe. But I think it's great to have diverse teams, but I think it's also important to be really proactive in promoting inclusivity as well. It's not just enough to have the diversity in the team. It's also looking at how do you promote that inclusivity within the team so that people can, start to kind of gain an appreciation of differences that exist, whether it's across different cultures or neurodiversity and so forth.
Great. Thanks for that. Chris, any best practice you've seen in any of the companies you worked in, like the software engineering teams?
Yeah, definitely. I'd just love to +1 everything that Karen and Joseanne have just been saying, that it really is important to get all those fundamentals right so that you actually do get that benefit. Now, I think I'll focus mine a little bit more on the how do we manage that friction and conflict? So I'd have the 3 pieces of advice. The first one is we need the team aligned around the goal. And if you provide that alignment, at least people will then get a feeling that they're all on the same team. If there's clarity there, they know their purpose, they know why they're there and what they're aiming to achieve. If there's a team that's just sort of pushed together and there's an amorphous direction, that can create a lot of friction because people can somewhat think that, oh, no, you're working towards a different goal to what I am. If everyone has an unshakable faith that, look, we're all aligned on trying to get this outcome, that can then enable you to do the second piece of advice, which is assume good intent. Every bit of conflict, if there's assuming good intent at the heart of it, will be productive. If that even wavers for a second, that's when conflict becomes destructive. So if you can align the team, and if they can all believe that they're working towards the same direction, they both want the same outcomes, or they all want the same outcomes, then you're able to get to what I think is the most important part, is curiosity, because we can all only observe the world through our own lens, and we will have blind spots that we just can't see. And curiosity as to, okay, well, we disagree on things. I can't see what you're seeing, but I want to be curious. I want you to explain it to me until I understand what I'm missing. If both parties or all parties come to the table with that sort of attitude, that's when you start to get, how do we synthesize these things together to get the best? So that alignment, assume good intent in order to get to, I want to understand you. I want to get curious about uncovering my blind spots by using your different perspective. And when you can do that, you can safely take the entire team's input and move forward.
I like it. Very insightful. Well done. Yvonne, you raised your hand. You wanted to share something?
I have a question from the audience, so thank you very much. And this question is for Chris from Charlie. So Chris, how do you combat any fear around people judging you for your neurodiversity? And how do you encourage others to be honest and not hide their neurodiversity?
Great question.
So that is a tough one. Fear around people judging you. Well, there is never any benefit in worrying about what you can't control. You can't control if they're going to judge you or not, and they're going to judge you. Like we are human, and how our brains work is heuristics. How our brains work is to look at the world and say, well, what pattern does this fit? What bucket do you fit from my existing knowledge? So we can't avoid that judgment. But what we can do is be a little bit proactive there in trying to change that narrative. Be proactive in showing all the other facets of my identity, how I am not the same as every other example of neurodiverse literature. I am a person with my own unique skills, my own unique benefits. See me as more than the bucket of what you've read. See me as my entire person. And if you can do that, if you can get in there and be your authentic self and be 100% of yourself, then your positive qualities will start to shine through, and people will start to pay attention to those and pay less attention to the preconceived stereotypes. Now, that does require work. That does require overcoming barriers. Is it easier for you to submit to those shackles and work within that constraint and hide who you are? Maybe for some people, the fear of, the fear of that judgment, the fear of it's going to be hard to do the work to move people through that, that may be too much. And, that's why masking is the most common thing you'll see out of neurodiverse people. It's easier to fit in with the world as a suboptimal you than it is to change the world. But if you can pick and choose your battles of, this is a small enough environment where I feel safe to challenge that and to show people who I am, that's how we make progress. And that's why it's so important what Karen and Josanne were saying around building this foundation of environment for everyone where they can be brave to be who they are, because it is scary when you show people who you are. It doesn't matter if it's neurodiversity or anything else. Like, it is scary to step off that ledge, and that needs trust. And do you trust first and then build up the rapport later, or do you need the rapport first and then take the leap? There are different approaches there, but it will be incremental and iterative. There are very few people who are brave enough to say, I know nothing about you, here's 100% of me. But yeah, the more we can give an environment where people can feel safe to open up, the more they can open up and start to challenge these perceptions and start to say, I am more than the label you're putting on.
Good advice. Thank you. Maybe let's focus our attention to some of the barriers to neurodiversity, which all of you might see out there. So what are those barriers you've seen? And then the question is, what's your advice to best how to overcome them? Whether that's at university, whether it's in IT companies, or whether it's in the research arena, right? In consulting companies. So Karen, do you want to start with that? And then, so what barriers do you see, and what's your advice how best to overcome them? Barriers to neurodiversity.
Probably a couple of things. So, the usual things, I guess, like awareness and understanding, like in terms of, I guess, removing any stigma that people might feel associated with neurodiversity. So, like as Chris was saying, like, do I want to show people who I am or tell people who I am? I'm sure I have people in my team who are very comfortable talking about their neurodiversity and what it means for them. I'm sure there are people that I manage that may be neurodiverse, but don't have a diagnosis. And there may be people who are diagnosed that aren't comfortable talking about it. So I think an awareness of understanding to overcome any stigma associated with neurodiversity and to actually appreciate and celebrate the things that neurodiverse individuals are good at, and the positive contribution that they make in the workplace, I think is one thing. And then as sort of alluded to this earlier, probably just in general, the kind of systems and processes and structures we put in place in the workplace, whether that's how we recruit, how our ways of working, how we deliver feedback, how we manage performance, how we design our sort of working spaces, how many of these things are designed for neurotypical people in mind. And so then how big is the appetite from business to actually kind of put these things under the microscope and really, examine whether, can we redesign these things in such a way that they actually give everyone an opportunity to thrive regardless of their cognitive style. So I think it's education, of course, is the usual, as well as just being brave enough to step back and reflect on the processes and the environment that we create for people in the workplace. That would be a couple of things, I think.
Thank you. No, very good. Josanne, over to you. What do you think? What do you see?
I think Karen covered, a lot of the main points. I don't really have much to add. I'll just kind of reiterate that, yes, lack of awareness and understanding. But I want to take the opportunity just to reflect on my experience having engaged with auticon. And it's not, like a plug or anything. It's just sincerely the experience that I've had that I think really just, diminished some of those barriers and mitigated those concerns that I had. And so we engaged auticon. We have a consultant working in our team on a data project. And from the beginning, the process was so supportive to not just set, the consultant up for success, but to set us up for success in having a really good working relationship with the consultant. So, at the beginning, we had a meeting with the consultant to get to know him. Then we had another meeting where he actually told us about what his working preferences are and the environment that he wants to work in and how he likes to work, and told us about the challenges that he may experience and where he may need extra support. And so I think that set both of us up really, really well. We also have a meeting with his neuroinclusion specialist. I think it's every fortnight, and then the technical director who oversees his work. And so that's an opportunity where, any issues are raised, but also wins, things that our consultant is proud of, feedback that I'd like to provide in terms of his work. So I think for me, that experience has really taken away any sort of perceived barriers that I may have had before. I just don't have those anymore.
Thank you very much. This is very kind of you, and I can assure everyone this was certainly not scripted. So I really
no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
It's very kind of you. Chris, what do you think? What barriers do you see out there? And you've probably seen quite a few over the years. And any advice how best to overcome them?
So we're all not lucky enough to work for a firm such as auticon, where you come in with the backing of, hey, look, I'm neurodiverse, this is what I need, etc. A lot of people will go through their whole life, maybe not even aware they're neurodiverse. That's a real challenge. So, where you've done the self-work and you can articulate the sort of environment you need, that's going to help a lot. But I want to call out that a lot of people aren't there in the journey. So a lot of people, because cognitive style is something that's completely invisible, they're going to be judged by a neurotypical rubric. So, that's like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. And this is where we need to get to, is that we need to start to dig under the hood of not jumping to, hey, person did this because reason I assume. You know, we need to get back to what I was saying before about curiosity. Okay, well, someone did something in a way that I didn't expect. Why? What am I missing? What's my blind spot here? And that usually opens the door to a conversation. And maybe that conversation is the first step on a journey towards a previously undiscovered diagnosis. Or maybe that is just the first step on someone understanding, you know, I'm neurotypical, but I work like this. You know, this isn't something that's limited to, you know, whether you have the diagnosis or not. This is applicable to all of us. We need to get beyond judging people by our preconceived expectations and get into something unexpected happened. How can I get curious about finding out more and finding out how we can improve it for next time? And that is a burden, whether it's the burden on the person doing the self-work or having the awareness or having the funding and support to get a diagnosis, whatever it might be. That's a burden on them. It's a burden on the organization to slow down and understand the differences and make the accommodations. It might be a burden in time. It might be a burden in cost. You know, and going back to that point before about all forms of diversity are friction. You know, and for some people, some companies who are running really lean, that's the last thing they want to hear. The last thing they want to hear is, oh, you mean we're going to have to slow down? We can't put out, you know, 15 widgets instead of putting out, oh, sorry, we put out 15 instead of 20, you know, we're not going to survive. So it's about that education of, well, what if they were 15 better widgets? You know, what if you will get so much more engagement from your customers because you are embracing a better way of doing things. You are coming out with higher quality outcomes. You know, so the biggest barrier I see is the idea that we need to slow down. We need to take that hit to get higher quality outcomes, to get better long-term environments and better long-term teams that produce better outcomes.
Thank you very much. No, fantastic. Yvonne, what are some of those questions you might have received from the audience?
Yeah, so there's let me just have a quick look. So we went, some of them have already been answered in these fantastic conversations and through your amazing experiences of fantastic, and thank you. There's one other question here from Natalie. What would be your advice to individuals who would like to overcome their biases in relation to neurodivergent individuals? And I think we have addressed this already. It's about being open-minded, having that safe environment and education as well. So really, that's what it's about: being open-minded at education. And what I really liked from you, Josanne, prioritize action over strategy, because we can work on a strategy for months or years, but we need action now. And I think that is a massive takeaway. Take personal responsibility to make things happen, make the change. We can all make the change. We don't need to wait for a strategy to actually be finalized. Let's just do it. I love it. Yes. Diversity brings friction, slow things down. We're always on the, fast, get things done. But let's just step back and reflect and think about it and get some more ideas and some more views. And then another takeaway: there's no money in Olympic sport. So thank you, Chris. I won't take that up. So yes, so no Olympic career for me. Yeah.
Good.
Do you have any other comments or questions?
If there are none, then maybe that's a chance for me to say a big thank you to all the panelists. It was fascinating and insightful, and I'm sure we could have, gone for hours. But I'm looking forward to basically that series of podcasts or webinars, and there's another one coming up in a few weeks' time. But thank you so much for sharing your experience, your insights, and have the courage as well just to talk openly about it. It has been fascinating. And,
yeah, it's been really insightful, and I'm sure the audience has has found it also extremely valuable. And now please make sure that you join us for our next 2 webinars. So the next one in this series is on workplace design. So how to build a thriving culture of neuro-acceptance. And that will be hosted by our very own Meredith Ward. She's our neuro-inclusion specialist. And she has really extensive experience in nurturing all aspects of neurodiverse teams. And we'll look at neurodiversity from a cultural level in an organization. And so this session is on the 16th of August. So make sure you don't miss it. And the final webinar, which will be run on the 13th of September, is on how to empower neurodivergent talent to enrich your innovation strategy. And that will be hosted by Audicon's technical director, Murray Wolfson. And this session will focus on the holy grail of corporate success and innovation. And if you want to have more information on Audicon, just go onto our website, audicon.com.au. If you have any questions about us, please make sure you get in touch via LinkedIn or send us an email. We're happy to chat more. And I will now hand over to Simon. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Look, that was amazing. I love listening to that, and I love that description around friction, embrace friction, which is counterintuitive, but absolutely makes sense the way it was being put to us. So thank you so much. Just a reminder, this will be available on our member portal. We'll be up there from tomorrow. Really appreciate it. Really looking forward to the next discussion on the 16th of August. Thanks everyone for attending, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. It was great. Bye.